Are you thinking about starting a business, but you don't know how to protect yourself or even where to begin? I'm Jeff Hampton, asset protection lawyer and author of Investor's Blueprint, Asset Protection Made Simple. Now, setting up an LLC might sound complicated, but today in this video, I'm breaking down 10 easy, simple steps you can follow to make sure your business is protected. Step number 1. Choosing a great, unique business name for your LLC. Now, first things first, we all know that we have to set up a name for our business. But when we're talking about forming an LLC for our business, we need to be very clear that that name for the LLC must be unique and it must be available through the Secretary of State in the state you're setting up your business. For example, if you're setting up a pizza company in your town and there's already a Pete's Pizza that's registered through your Secretary of State for the state that you live in, then you're not going to be able to use that name for your LLC. So I want to remind you of something. Many people think that the name of their LLC has to be the same name that they do all their marketing in. It actually doesn't. You can set up a business LLC that's under a different name. Then you can also set up a DBA, a doing business as, that you register there in the county of your state that you can do all your marketing through. So I have many clients that will set up a marketing name that they do business as, but then their primary LLC name for their business is something altogether different. Now, I learned this lesson the hard way when I first set up an LLC many years ago. I went and I had a favorite name in mind. So I decided I was going to go ahead and put together my LLC based upon that favorite name. But I never actually double checked to see if that name was already taken in the registry of the Secretary of State. And of course, come to find out, it already was, which then caused me to have to go through and do a bunch of additional work. So before you do anything, make sure you check to see if the name you really want is already taken. You say, where do I check and how do I find out? Very simple. Go to your state's Secretary of State website. And there's an actual portion of that website that allows you to do a search for names of LLCs to make sure if they've already been taken and show as registered by the Secretary of State. Now, once you've got that perfect name locked down, it's time to make things official with some paperwork. Don't worry, it's easier than it sounds. This brings us to step number 2, drafting your articles of organization. Articles of organization are the official documents needed to create your LLC. Think of this as your LLC's birth certificate. It's a form that includes the basics, like your business name, your address, your registered agent, the purpose of your business. Now don't worry, this is not a difficult form. It's usually a fill-in-the-blank form provided by the state. It's not something that's an in-depth narrative. For example, many years ago, before I became an attorney, I was very intimidated by the terms articles of organization. I thought it was some in-depth thing that I had to know all the knowledge of the law in order to set up. Actually, did a little bit of investigating. I found out that it was actually a one-page form that the state provides where I fill in the blank a lot of the information. So this is actually one of the easier parts of setting up a valid LLC. Now, as a practical matter, watch out here because some states may not call it articles of organization. They may call it a certificate of formation or a certificate of organization. Either way, it's all the same thing, and you need to make sure you have this filled out in order to have a valid LLC. With your articles drafted, you are now one step closer to an official LLC. But the next step here, you really need to make sure you have someone that helps handle your very important mail. That brings us to our next step, the step number 3, the importance of having a registered agent. A registered agent is a person or a company that agrees to receive legal notices and state mail related to your state LLC. Now, let me make it real clear here. Every state requires that in order to have a valid LLC, you must have a registered agent. So don't skip this. Now, as an example, back before I became a lawyer, I set up my first LLC and I didn't know anything. So I named myself as a registered agent and then I went on vacation. And of course, while I was gone, I received a very important legal notice about something I had to be in compliance with to file another form. And I almost missed the deadline because I didn't receive it because I was out having a vacation. So be careful here. One of the best ways to do this is to either appoint a company or you can have either your lawyer be your registered agent, have someone who's reliable that's keeping up with your mail, and that way you can make sure you don't miss any legal notices. And if you happen to be looking to set up an LLC for real estate, I also advise clients to be very careful. Do not list your name as the registered agent if you want to have any privacy. Maybe you don't want greedy lawyers knowing you own this really nice short-term rental vacation property as an Airbnb owner. If that's the case, if you list yourself as the registered agent, the lawyer can find out who you are and serve you with paperwork. So remember, it's good to have a registered agent. You must set it up, but know the reason why you're setting up your LLC and don't miss those legal notices. Okay, so you've got your LLC name, you've got your paperwork ready, and you have your registered agent to handle your official mail. That brings us to step number 4. Filing your LLC with the state. This is where everything becomes official. We now file those articles of organization or that certificate of formation with the actual Secretary of State. And that's normally where almost every state requires this to be done, is through your state's Secretary of State. Now, when you go to file your actual LLC with your Secretary of State, don't be surprised if you pay some type of filing fee that might range as cheap as $50 up to a couple of $100. And certain states, depending on your LLC, particularly if you own real estate, can charge you an annual fee for this LLC. Like when you deal with California, you could pay as much as $900 a year to keep up with an LLC. So it's important you take a look at your state's requirements and what those filing fees are. But once you actually file these articles of organization, you are now actually launching your business. Now, practical tip here. Some people have heard that other states provide certain protections more than the state they live in. For example, maybe you're in California and you're starting a business and you say, well, I've heard California laws are not very good or not very friendly for my business. So maybe I should, even though I'm maybe running a pizza shop here in California, maybe I'll set up a Wyoming or a Delaware LLC to take care of things for me. Be careful here. As a practical matter, one of the requirements to set up a valid LLC is you must be doing business in that state. So unless you're actually transacting business in Delaware or Wyoming, it's always better to make sure if you want any type of actual protection and good LLC formation, you need to make sure you set up the LLC in the state where you're actually doing business. Once you file your LLC, congratulations, your business is born. But don't pop the champagne yet, because there's still certain steps you need to take in order to properly form your business and actually get it off the ground. That brings us to step number 5. Create an operating agreement for your LLC. Think of an operating agreement as the internal rule book for your LLC. It's the operator's manual. It's the rules for the relationship that lays out exactly what your business does, the purpose of your business, if you have any partners, what the requirements are for running the business, and maybe if you do have multiple people involved, we have to determine how do people get paid? What is the owner's draw? What is the priority for those partners? This is the ultimate rules for the relationships of the business. Years ago, when I first set up an LLC, before I even went to law school, I was in a bit of a partnership with someone else, and we did take the time, even though it sounded silly, we sat down over coffee and we hashed out all the what if scenarios. What if you disagree with this or I disagree with that? How are we going to resolve our partnership dispute? We made sure and had all of that included in our operating agreement, which was a good thing, because a year later we had a disagreement over whether to take out a loan. That helped us know exactly what to do and avoid litigation so that we were able to resolve that dispute. Now, I know some people say, well, Jeff, do I really need an operating agreement, especially for a single member LLC? Well, some states don't require you to have an operating agreement for a single member LLC, but I'm going to tell you, I think it's a very good idea, particularly if you want any type of protection. It doesn't have to be complex, but you need to have the basics in that operating agreement, even if it's just you. You need to have the ownership distribution, who's getting what are the roles that you have in the business, what are the rules, and what is the purpose of that business? Because here's the deal. If for some reason you ever get sued, one of the first things a judge is going to ask for is the operating agreement to figure out if this is a legitimate business. And plaintiffs' attorneys have a tendency to want to scrutinize that operating agreement to try to pierce the veil of any protection you might have in that LLC to try to get to your personal assets. Okay, with your operating agreement in place for your business, now we have to get you bankable. We need to make sure you have a valid bank account for your LLC, for your business. So that brings us to our next step. We must set up an EIN number with the IRS. EIN numbers, known as an employer identification number, is a unique business ID number that you can use to register with the IRS so that you can open up a dedicated business LLC bank account. Getting an EIN number is free. free and it's easy to do right on the IRS website. So be careful. Don't go out there paying some of these online companies to set up your EIN number. There's no reason for you to do that because you can do it in just mere minutes. In fact, I remember when I first started my first LLC years ago when I was still in my teens, one of the first thing I did is I went and I was excited because I didn't know how any of this worked, and I thought it would take forever to do it through the IRS. And then I got so excited to realize it literally took me less than 10 minutes. And by the time I was done, I was ready to go and I could go straight to a bank and open up a new bank account. Important tip here, do not set up your EIN number before you set up your LLC. Always set up your LLC first, because when you go to apply for your EIN number, you're going to be required to put specific information into that application that can only come from a validly set up LLC. Great, so now your LLC has an identity with the government. You're both official in your state and with the IRS. But do you have all the licenses and permits necessary to open your doors? This now brings us to step number 7. Obtain the necessary business permits and licenses. Setting up an LLC is just the first step in getting your business off the ground, but you need to always check your industry and the requirements in your state. It may require you to get a particular permit to operate or a business license in order to be in compliance with local government. For example, if you run a restaurant, you've got to get permits with the health department or a license. Same thing if you're a contractor, you have to be licensed through your state in order to validly operate. I had a friend of mine reach out to me who set up a brand new home cottage bakery is what she called it. And essentially she was selling cupcakes, selling them from her home. She had a dedicated space where she was doing her work. She set up her LLC, did everything we talked about here, but she forgot she was supposed to get a quote, cottage food permit from her county. She failed to do that. She ran into serious problems with her county when she did not receive that permit. Luckily, she was able to remediate the whole thing. She had to just take a short class, paid a $50 fee. Now she was in business. Okay, we're getting real close here. So the next thing we need to do is to make sure we have an actual business bank account, and then we need to separate our personal bank account activity from our business bank account activity. Step number 8, we need to open a business bank account. I cannot stress enough the importance of running your business activity and all your financials through your business bank account, not your personal accounts. One of the first things you should do after setting up that EIN number is to go ahead and set up your business bank account. This is really important if you want to have some actual liability protection, so that way if some sort of contract issue comes up or a lawsuit comes up, you don't want that lawyer who's suing you to be able to get and pierce through the veil of protection of your LLC to get to your personal assets. The best way to make sure they can't do that is to keep all of your financial transactions in your business dedicated into that business bank account of your LLC, and then to keep all of your personal activity separate from your business. When I first started out, I made the classic rookie mistake of using my personal credit card to pay for some of my business expense activity. I was standing in line at Costco and I was like, ooh, look, this would be great for my business. And what did I do? I pulled out my personal credit card and I ran that transaction, and then I reimbursed myself later. Don't do this. I didn't realize it at the time. I hadn't gone to law school yet, but I was commingling funds. I was doing activity with a personal account and then reimbursing myself from a business account. This is one of the biggest no-nos and one of the biggest ways to have lawyers pierce through the veil of your LLC protection, and you lose the whole purpose for why you set up the LLC. Now, it's really easy to set up your business bank account. You need your EIN number, your articles of organization or your certificate of formation, and then usually they want some type of ID and an initial bank deposit. It's not hard to do, but it's critical. The moment you set it up, make sure you process all of your payments through that new bank account, and make sure you make payments to vendors and other people through that primary business account. All right, your financial affairs are in order. You've got your business bank account dialed in. Now, how are you going to be taxed by the IRS? Step number 9. Understand your LLC tax options. One of the most common misconceptions I hear from people when they set up an LLC is they think it somehow changes their tax options. But in reality, if you set up a single member LLC, you don't have to worry about it changing your tax election because it's just you. So the IRS sees it no different than if you were filing your own personal return. So the LLC will have pass-through tax treatment. If you're treated as a partnership, let's say you have 2 partners or 3 or 4 partners within an LLC, it can also be possible pass-through tax treatment so that you're able to file it on your normal tax return, but you may have to file a separate return for a partnership LLC. Now, one exception to this is LLCs do have financial flexibility to allow you to file as an S Corp or a C Corp if it makes financial sense. For example, for one of my law firms, I started off as a normal LLC, but over a period of time, as it began to earn more and more revenue, I was able to convert to an S Corp because I was able to pay myself a lower salary, and then all the additional revenue, the distributions, were taxed at a lower amount. Why? Because I don't have to pay as much self-employment tax under an S Corp. So it's all about whether or not it makes financial sense for you. Most accountants and CPAs will tell you you really want to try to be making at least around the $300,000 mark before it's worth converting to an S Corp. But I will admit, it does involve a little bit more paperwork and compliance, so it may not make sense for you to do it initially. But once you start really ramping up your revenue and your business starts to skyrocket, it might make sense to save in taxes. Now, we're almost done setting up your LLC success, but there's one last point, one last tip we have to make sure we cover, and that is step number 10. You need to maintain your LLC long term. Congratulations, you've set up your LLC, but this is not a set it and forget it situation. Now that you have it set up, you've got to make sure you take the proper steps to keep it running. Think of this as similar to the maintenance your car needs. If you don't keep up with it, the whole thing will fall apart. Same thing here. Your business needs maintenance, and when it comes to your legal entity, your LLC, you have to make sure you maintain your state compliance. True story here. A client of STR Law Guys, we helped them set up their initial LLC. They decided to maintain it on their own. They got so busy, they forgot to file their annual report, and before they knew it, the state had actually made their LLC inactive. She had to pay a penalty, and she had to scramble to get it reinstated. Now, she sets annual reminders, she follows her protocol and her standard operating procedure, and she makes sure she doesn't miss it. Because just like you have to maintain everything else in your life, you still have to maintain your LLC. Pro tip here, once you set up an LLC, if for some reason your LLC was set up where it does not have pass-through tax treatment, your deadline to file your tax return for your business LLC could be moved up a month. Now we're talking about filing in March rather than April. So make sure you know how you're setting this up, how it affects your tax filings, and make sure you know when your annual report for your state's LLC is due so you don't miss it. There you have it, how to form an LLC and start a business in 10 steps. But what if you happen to set up a single member LLC? Did you know that there are mistakes with single member LLCs that could ruin the whole reason you set up an LLC to begin with? Check out this next video where I break down the top 5 mistakes with single member LLCs and how you can protect yourself. See you over there.